Hi everyone, and welcome to our weekly video all about what's happening in our class, English 10 Honors. This is Ronni Chern, Langley High School, and I'd like to talk with you today about our passage analysis this week. It will be similar to the one that I'm going to present to you today, so please look at this as a model of how you can write a rhetorical passage analysis. The one I'm going to look at with you today is based on The Honest Tradesman. It's in Book 2, Chapter 14 of A Tale of Two Cities. It's on page 161 in our text. And the actual prompt will be something like this. Discuss the author's implicit attitude towards mob mentality and how he reveals this attitude. You might consider diction, syntax, imagery, or any rhetorical device in discussing how the author achieves his purpose. So you're going to look at a passage and consider what is the author's attitude towards mob mentality and how does he tell us what he's thinking. First question you have to ask yourself is, how do I write this rhetorical analysis? So in order to write it, you need to look at the passage very, very carefully. You want to read it, you want to annotate it, you want to chunk it or look for any changes or shifts or movements. You want to reflect on the ideas in the passage. You want to write a basic outline and then draft your response. One of the key things you need to do, however, is not just annotate by looking at words, but thinking while you're annotating. In many ways, simply questioning, raising questions. You may not know the answers as you annotate, but the reflection thereafter will help you. So what are you asking yourself as you are annotating? What is the writer saying? How is he or she saying it? How has the writer organized or structured the writing? And really, what's the purpose? What's the main idea or point that he or she is trying to convey to you? One of the things you can use for rhetorical analysis is something called soapstone. It's a way of considering all elements. So it's an acronym. So we say soapstone. Who is the speaker? What is the occasion? What is the audience? What is the purpose? What is the actual subject, and what tone and techniques are being used? If we can address all of those, we've done what we call a truly developed rhetorical analysis. Here's the passage we're going to be looking at for our analysis today. It begins with the phrase, "Funerals had at all times a remarkable attraction for Mr. Cruncher. He always picked up his senses and he became excited when a funeral passed." Naturally, therefore, a funeral with his uncommon attendance excited him greatly, and he asked of the first man who ran against him, "Who is it, brother?" or "What is it, brother?" And so we have a series of questions. If you look carefully at this passage, Charles Dickens has helped us understand what's going on with mobs and how he feels about them. So let's see if you can see or read or hear what I'm seeing or hearing or reading. I'm simply asking questions. For example, the opening word funeral. Well, I usually associate that with death or despair, loss, very somber. Yet somehow the opening sentence doesn't seem to have that feel for it. There seems to be a contrast between what I expect, that is the solemnity of funerals, and what is described. There seems to be excitement. There seems to be almost a party time mentality. Why would the author do that? What is Dickens telling us? Well, the funeral, it says, has an attraction for this character and makes him exciting. Why would a funeral be a source of interest and excitement? Is it any funeral, or is it this specific funeral? This one for a spy or a traitor. Are you seeing or thinking what I'm seeing or thinking? I hope so. So let's look for some clues. How do I know the funeral is a source of excitement? I see a phrase such as uncommon attendance excited him. The word is right there in front of me. I see another word, clapping his hands, celebratory, greatest ardor, vociferating in a surprising heat. I see exclamation marks, punctuation, spies, yaha, phrases such as that. I know this is fun time, this is party time, this is great excitement. So in the passage, I'm now saying, all right, this man, okay, Jerry Cruncher, and the group of people around him are very excited. Does the passage stay with excitement or does it change? So I've noticed now that I have some movement going on in the next paragraph. There seems to be a prevalent absence of any idea, as Dickens writes. Well, if there's no ideas, these are unthinking people. And what's happening? Well, suddenly now there's a change. They now want to go over to this hearse, and they want to have the person inside in the carriage to grab him, hurt him, do something to him. Have him out, he says. And they're mobbing the vehicles. So we've changed from the excitement to action. The action seems to get even worse, as after the man actually leaves the carriage, they suddenly take all of these objects that they find there and they tear them to pieces, anything they can find. And the townspeople are so frightened by their behavior, their out of control, wild behavior, that they shut up their shops. For according to Dickens, in those times, crowds stopped at nothing, and he refers to them as a monster much dreaded. That's a nice image right there. We might consider it to be a metaphor. So we've got a group of people functioning as a crowd and a mob that have gone wild. So what kind of shifts? Well, we seem to have some movement. We seem to have some change, some development, from being excited to starting to act to going out of control acting. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is Dickens telling us about the behavior of this mob? We have them having them out, pulling them out, tearing them to pieces, but then they seem to stop for a moment. There's a protest faint and brief, so maybe it's short-lived. But then the excitement seems to stir them to another direction, an even more unthinking one. The sport of they're going to break windows, and now they've gone really wild, impeaching casual passerbyers. And so what started out as the excitement of celebrating the death of a traitor now becomes impeaching casual passerbyers. They're totally out of control. Eventually, does the crowd melt down? It does, Dickens tells us. And that's the usual progress of a mob. They spur, they get excited, they do horrible things, and then they disappear. So, what is his attitude towards this mob? Well, he believes, it seems to me, that any occasion can change the focus from what it originally began, which was a funeral for a spy. They're spontaneous people in these crowds, and when the mobs get together, they become unthinking. And they're swept up in frenzy and unity, and often an horrific act can prevail. In this case, passerbyers are simply being hurt because they were simply passing by. So what is his final attitude towards mobs? Well, I think he seems to conclude that rational thinking individuals become mindless members of a violent entity. For Dickens, mobs are unstoppable forces. They're very much like waves, like the water that comes in faster and faster. They are dangerous, they are unpredictable, and they are overall frightening in their inhumanity. There's an image of the sea raging in the story. You'll notice it seems to have some parallels right here. So how do I write my analysis? Where do I begin? Well, we always begin with our thesis, trying to make sure that we have a focus for our writing. What do I want to include? A what, a how, and a why. So what's the what? What are we talking about in this passage? Well, Dickens's depiction of Jerry Cruncher and a mob observing a funeral procession of Roger Cly, a spy, in A Tale of Two Cities, that's the what. Well, what's going on? It says how. What does he do? Well, Dickens uses progressively violent verbs, exclamatory remarks and punctuation, and images of uncontrolled actions. And what's his point? What is he trying to convey to us? The purpose? To criticize the dangerous, violent, uncontrolled behavior of mobs, where rational thought is obliterated by impulsive, unthinking, zealous group mentality. That's my thesis. So I have a what, I have a why, and I have a how, all the elements that I need. The most important part is the why, because without the why, I can simply say this is what he's doing, but I'm not explaining the significance or purpose or idea that he's trying to express, which is the key to a good thesis statement, the purpose. How do I write the analysis? Well, I want to introduce the text. I therefore want to give some context to it. I'm going to do it in what we call order. Simply, I'm going to chunk it or chronologically present it, the first section of the text, the second section of the text, and finally the third section. And then I'm going to conclude. How does the text work together, and what does that text mean? So, of course, I'm going to follow in my paragraphs the claim evidence commentary approach. Basically, it's helping me explain my point. I'm providing specific textual evidence, and I'm explaining the significance of that evidence. For example, here are some CE-CEC paragraphs on this particular passage. One claim I might make: Dickens initially describes the growing crowd as full of excitement and gaiety, rather than solemnity normally associated with funerals, through increasingly gleeful words and enthusiastic punctuation, suggesting, here's my point, that crowds or mobs can pervert an occasion. What's my evidence? Well, one example, he says, the funeral with its uncommon attendance excited him greatly. The excitement. Some more, the phrase, and now I'm going to comment on it, excited him greatly introduces the contrast between the sadness and seriousness normally associated with funerals with the delight of the death of a spy, reinforcing the significance of revenge as satisfying and exhilarating. It's not just any death, but it's the death of a spy. Ooh, we've got him. Some more evidence that this particular crowd, once again, is perverting the occasion of a funeral. They are vociferating in a surprising heat with the greatest ardor. And phrases such as spies and yaha and spies. The exclamation marks for spies and the elongation of the word with the hyphen, the spies, stresses the joy of celebrating the death of a spy and the retribution against those who have betrayed them. The words ardor or vociferating echo the extreme or degree of this celebration and the surprise passion or energy reverberating throughout the large crowd. So each section needs to have a claim, evidence, and commentary. And you need to develop that. And there are various methods of development. Often you can compare and contrast, as I was doing, what I expected versus what I saw. It could be cause and effect. It could be some examples, some reasons, some classification, some facts, some statistics. How you develop your claim is really based on the evidence that you have. Finally, when you finish developing your three-body paragraphs, you want to add a conclusion. What do each of them lead towards? Well, they're hopefully pushing you towards a conclusion. And then after you've written your paper, please make sure you add some careful reading of it. You have some final edits, some proofreading, some checking by you, a peer, a friend, a relative. But make sure that it looks the way you want it and sounds the way you want it to sound. And it is as precise as you can make it. Finally, you're going to look back and say, all right, do I have everything I need? Do I have an intro that culminates in a thesis? Do I have various body paragraphs with claims, evidence, and commentary? Have I brought it to close? Have I talked about rhetorical strategies, explaining how the author used them to convey his or her attitude towards the subject? If I've done all of that, well, voila, I've finished my essay, and I am very proud of all that I've done. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you enjoyed listening to Thinking Aloud, which is what I was modeling through this, and I hope you'll be able to apply some of that to your passage analysis this week. Bye.